Hi, everyone, and welcome to my very first Truly Balanced vlog. And I'm doing these as part of my sort of overall health plan. So to help you figure out what is it you want to include in your own personal health plan, because we all need something a little bit different. And who I have with you today is somebody who I really, really adore. Her name is Mandy Thomas, and she is my yoga instructor. Now, I want to start a little bit. I think some of you probably know that I was a competitive runner in Canada for many years, and I ran competitive track up until about the age of 28, middle, long distance, did marathons when I was quite young. Anyway, in those days, our coach had us doing a lot of, we had strength training a couple times a week. And, you think, why do runners have to do strength training? Well, because it gives you power. So it helps propel you forward. And we did stretching. Yes, it was just sort of one of those things that was always part of our training and part of my life so that I didn't get injured. However, no one ever suggested yoga. And through the years, as I've aged, and I'm now the lovely age of 60, I have realized that I need to do things slightly differently. And I started yoga a while back, but I wanted to bring Mandy on because I wanted her to talk a little bit about why yoga is an important aspect of any sort of balanced exercise regime. So Mandy, I'm going to turn it over to you. But first I should really mention a little bit about Mandy. She's been my yoga instructor. Gosh, I don't know how many years, actually, Mandy, you'll have to answer that one. But she's much more than that. She's also a runner. She does some ultra running, like up in the mountains. She's a crazy skier. She's done half marathons. She's also a cold water swimmer. And it's because of her that I have been swimming in the lake these last 3 winters. She's also done lots of CrossFit training as well. She's a mother of 3 children, and she's lived in a number of countries. So she's really quite an amazing person, and it's a privilege to have her here. So let's start, Mandy, with you telling me a little bit about your yoga journey. So how did you end up becoming a yoga instructor?
Hey, Annette, it's really nice to be here with your truly balanced people. Gosh, you make me sound quite hyperactive, and I think I probably am a little bit hyperactive. I am definitely one of those people who's always moved my body a lot, and I know that isn't the case for everybody and a lot of the people I work with and a lot of my friends. But I was always someone who was moving a lot. And when I first started yoga, I was actually 19 when I took my first class in Oregon with a guy I met when I was traveling in hippie Eugene, Oregon. I actually loved that first class, and I sought out yoga when I came back to London where I was living. But for me at the beginning, it was another one of my sports. I used to play hockey, I used to run, I was going to the gym by this point. And I thought I was good at yoga because I could, lift my leg higher than the person next to me or whatever that was. And I continued to practice because I enjoyed it. And I think I always enjoyed the way it made me feel, but I don't think I really noticed that to begin with. I think I was more interested in being good at it, whatever that means. It was really when I became pregnant with my first child. I was here in Geneva. I'd started a practice in town, which I loved. When I got pregnant, I couldn't do all the things I loved. I couldn't snowboard. I couldn't run. It felt awful in my body to run. I could swim, but I don't love swimming. And yoga was the one thing that I could still do. I still felt like me. And so it became something extra. It became this kind of me place. And that continued all the way through those very difficult early parenting years. Anyone who's had little children, I was deeply challenged by becoming a mother. And at one point I had 3 children under the age of 4 and under. We moved to Costa Rica when my little guy was 7 months old. There was a lot of challenge going on. I'd actually lost my practice at that point because I didn't have time. And when we moved to Costa Rica, I had time and I sunk back into it. And it became a little bit of a refuge for me. And then I had a refuge to come back to myself, to not just be mum, to be me again. And then as I got back into it and I was practicing much more regularly, I had this amazing period. I was in my early 40s and I was actually getting better physically at things in yoga. And that was really empowering at the age of 43 and going, oh my God, I'm better at this than I was 3 months ago. Not because that mattered, but because when you're 43 and you're a mother, there's not maybe many things that you're achieving and improving on. And that felt really cool. And now I come back to Geneva, I teach. I think I'm in a different phase of my life. I'm 52, I'm almost 53. Now I'm just all about holistic health. I think since pregnancy, yoga has been part of my mental health practice. And now I think of my yoga very much as a holistic practice. And from the physical side, I'm just interested in staying healthy, globally healthy, aging well, moving well, feeling good in my body. You use the word power, feeling powerful in terms of feeling good. So that it's, you know, and I think what I love about yoga is it's so vast and broad and deep that it can be all these different things at different times in our life, but it can also be these different things on different days. You know, I can have a morning practice where I want to push hard, and I can have an evening practice where I just need to release the day and soften. So I love its variety. That was quite a long answer to a short question.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. No, it's interesting. I didn't know all of that, and I thank you for being vulnerable, actually, as well, because it's true. You know, when we become mothers, we lose a little bit of our identity, and we have a new identity, and that transition can be rather tricky. And finding, when you said, you know, you sort of refound yourself when you went to Costa Rica, but you already had your 3 children at that point. So it's that me time. And I think in the beginning, we don't think we can give ourselves that me time anymore. And it's really necessary as a mother, especially of multiple young children, because they do require a lot of your energy, and we have to, you know, we only have so much, right? So we have to balance it in some way. So thank you, because that was a really nice share. I have to say, you know, my yoga journey was a little bit different, but like you, I'm a mover, you know, kind of really active and always kind of on the go. And I was living in Singapore when someone suggested that I should do yoga. And actually, it's kind of interesting. I had both of my kids at that point too. And I thought, yeah, okay, fine, I'll give it a go. So I'm in this yoga place. I'm thinking, oh my God, if they make me stand in this position any longer, I might have to scream at somebody. Like, I thought, this is no way am I doing this stuff. So instead, I found something called Kalinetics, which was from Germany. And I liked it because it had a little more movement, a lot more movement. But we were doing 100 reps of different things. It's like, oh. Anyway, but my homeopath did say to me, because I had started really looking at my whole health very differently after I had my children. And he said, look, you really need a yin exercise because you're too yang, which I think is what you were expressing before. So it wasn't really until I guess I was in Atlanta and I started a bit of yoga practice. But when I came here and met you is really when I really started it more. And I incorporate yoga now after every run that I do. Whether I know some of the moves now because we've done them many times, but it's really, it helps me a lot after. I used to have a stretching routine, but if I do the yoga after running, I find it opens me up in a different way, and my joints feel better because, again, as I said, you know, I'm 60 now, so it's not quite the same, and I really need to be opening my body, but it's also opening myself. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that, how yoga is more than stretching and sort of what it does do for the body, mind, and soul.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Someone says to me, you know, if you do yoga without breathing, it's just stretching. And it's like, well, people come to yoga because they think it's stretching, and that's totally fine. And, you know, I started my yoga journey for a purely physical experience. I think it's really normal that people are attracted to the physicality of yoga, and sometimes the other stuff happens afterwards. But I think what makes it different is that it is always looking to work body, breath, and mind at the same time. I would argue spirit and soul as well. And I think we all have a slightly different take on what that means to us. To me, the spirit, the soul is the bit of you that isn't the body and isn't the mind. And I'm very clear there is another bit, whatever you want to call it. Some people not so much, doesn't matter. Yoga is a philosophy, it's not a religion. And it is not subsumed by or contrasting to any spiritual belief. But I think this idea that you're bringing the whole of yourself, And in yoga, there's this idea that you have different layers of your being. You have your and actually it's like from the outside in. You have your physical self, you have your breath self, you have your energetic self, you have your mental self, which incorporates your emotional self, and then you have your wisdom self. And then somewhere inside of that, you have your divine self. And the idea is that you bring in all of this to your practice. I think very simply, when we move in yoga, we're focusing on movement and breath together, which already gives the mind something to hang on. It's like a hook, because our minds are doing this all the time, right? Some of our minds are doing this faster or slower, and some of us are doing it more than others. But it's almost like, let's bring the mind to a hook. Let's give it a shape. Let's give it a breath that goes with that shape. Let's just slow it all down. And as we know, and I think increasingly modern science is showing what the yogis always knew. When you bring the body and the mind together, it's really powerful. So, and I think whatever you think when you get on your mat, whatever goal you start with, there's a bit of magic to yoga that it just kind of happens. I always say to people, just get on the mat, try, see what happens. I was working with a friend's husband last night who's a very advanced cyclist. He uses body loads. He's going to do the attack. He's doing the big races. Very athletic guy. He wanted to do some stretching. So we did some yoga. And at the end, he's like, oh, I feel kind of fluid. I feel kind of different. And I think that's where yoga is different to stretching. It's a whole person experience. It's a mind and a body all at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. I love when you talk about how the different layers of the body, because I work from those philosophies as well, in all of the different areas that I work in. And when you talk about yoga with movement with the breath, I think in the beginning that was the most challenging thing for me, was the movement with the breath, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm doing this all wrong, until you finally let go of wanting to do it right, which you mentioned earlier, and suddenly it just flows, and when you're in flow. And I think sometimes you even call the classes flow, and it's like, yes, of course, that's perfect for me. That's what I need. So thanks. That's a really great description. And I know my husband's come and done yoga as well, and he was shocked at how it also required strength. So it's interesting. He's like, oh, wow, it's not just stretching. Like, you realize, oh yeah, this is different. So perhaps maybe we can move it into a couple of other areas too, because it's sort of, why is it, or could you describe maybe why the human body needs different types of movement? Because you do so many different exercises as well. And we've been on a couple of workshops together where you talked about this. And I think it's an important thing for my subscribers to hear, like, why is it that the body needs different types of movement instead of just being a cardio junkie or a weightlifting junkie? Why do I need all this?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, I studied psychology. That was rather a lot of years ago now. But one of the things I remember is the evolutionary biology course, which taught me at a very deep level. If you want to think about us as beings, if you want to think about our mind, our body, and how it was designed hundreds of thousands of years ago for our hunting and gathering existence. And we haven't evolved out of that. So our body spent its whole time moving. We had to move, we had to reach, we had to run. We had to get away from predators. We had to get prey. We had to look after our young. So we were designed to move. And I think, again, increasingly as science catches up, we're understanding if you don't move, it's not good for your physicality and it's not good for your mental health. I think the mental health stuff is catching up now. I think we've known for a long time, if you don't move, it's not good for your body. Your bones and their density need movement. You were talking about your joints. Your joints need fluidity. They need movement in their entire range. And this is where it's really interesting, because if you're a massive cyclist or a massive runner, I mean, we're pretty active people, you often have a lot of repetitive movement in a certain direction, but you're not doing the other stuff. Now, if you're a very sedentary person and you're not moving enough, you often end up with some of the same patterns in the body. You can have some of the same stiffness from a sedentary lifestyle or from a very active lifestyle. And your business is called Truly Balance. What are we talking about here? We're talking about coming back to the center and having stuff in balance. So if you're a junkie in any one direction, if you're a runner, you're going to need to balance that repetitive movement. If you're a massive weightlifter, if you don't have the mobility in the body, you're not going to be able to hold those weights in the correct position to really power you up. And at a certain point, you're not going to be able to go heavier. And you're also potentially just going to end up super muscly and not moving, which is not very healthy. If you only do stuff like yoga, or actually if you're a very physically flexible person, if you were born very flexible, and this is where the yoga world has been actually for the last 30 years, it's attracted those flexible people because they thought they were good at it. Actually, that can be quite dangerous too. If you're very mobile and you don't have the strength within your range of motion, you can end up really damaging yourself. So we want this balance. We want to be able to move healthily. And I was talking about the systems of the body that are affected. You want a healthy heart, healthy lungs, good circulation. Your nervous system, I think increasingly learning about how we soothe and regulate our nervous system. And so all these things come together. Our immune system, we've been talking about a lot these last few years. Inflammation in the body, its effect on our organs, our brain, all of this stuff together. And I think, again, from a physical level, yoga's different to other stuff like your husband found. It demands a different kind of strength. We use isometric strength a lot, which is when you don't move, you hold a position, which is different to other things. We also use, or I certainly, the way I teach, I use a lot of eccentric strength, which is when you're using your muscles in their extended position. And that's quite different in sport. We often build concentric strength, and that can actually shorten the muscles and make everything a little bit tighter. So it all comes back. I'm not a Buddhist. If I was a Buddhist, I would be able to talk more about it. But this middle path, this middle way, my mum used to say, and it used to drive me crazy, everything in moderation. And as I get older, my mum's still alive, as I get older, I kind of think, that was kind of right, really. As you know, if you're really off the spectrum in any athletic field, those people often end up with quite serious injuries, and their bodies can be a real mess, never mind their minds. So, what are we aiming for here? And I don't think it's coincidence that with all my movability, I actually ended up just sinking into yoga. I say it was how I learned to be still, at least sometimes, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I really do love that.
People always think, oh my God, I could never be a yogi because I can't sit still. It's like, I have to do yoga because I can't sit still. It's the only way I get anywhere close. I think other yogis are like that.
That's interesting because I really didn't do well with yoga until after I had done sophrology, which is interesting because in the sophrology practice, yoga is the Raja yoga is the basis of the whole first level. So we do a lot of different movements, but not at all in yoga clothes, and it's very, very different. But the movements come from yoga, and but there's this dynamic portion, and then there's like you immediately stopped and you have a sensing, and then you do something dynamic, then you sense, and then there's a visualization, and then you sense. So it was moving my mind and my body at the same time, which I really needed in order to learn how to stop, because I was just moving always too much. So that practice then allowed me to actually come to yoga properly, which is interesting. I couldn't get there. And I do the mindfulness work as well. And for mindfulness is something as well that I would have had to do the sophrology first before I could get to the mindfulness, just because of the way my mind and body works. And as I said before, I mean, everybody's different. So, and I know, like, I like everything you mentioned, because honestly, there's so much to, as you said, balance. It's how do you find balance in your life? And people say, oh, well, I really don't have time for it. But I know you have 30-minute videos that you can get online that you can do first thing in the morning before you go out. It's like, hey, this is great. So you can do it short. That's the thing, is people think they have to go to a long class or something, and they don't. There are other ways around it, and there's lots available. So for you, you have classes offered at all different times. You even got paddleboard yoga, which I love.
What I say to people is, if you want to start a practice, I think you should think of little but often. So whether you're one of these, you're a more sedentary person, or you're maybe someone who's perhaps pushing your body quite hard, again, those two people need the same thing, little but often. because you're looking to shift something. If you're looking to create a bit of space in the joints, if you're looking to build a bit of strength, if you're looking to learn to connect the breath and the mind, you know, you want to learn in incremental steps, like anything in life. So I think starting little but often, and there's a sort of idea that you, the practice, we practice to learn responses to things that we can take out in the world. We practice to experience and to respond, not to react, but little by little. I always say, start from where you are, do what you can, and keep doing it. Sri Patabi Joyce, who came up with Ashtanga Yoga, one of his most famous quotes is practice and all is coming. So the idea is if you commit to it, you just keep going and the benefits will come. I must pick you up on saying, people say they don't have enough time. I say things like that in my life too. It's not like I'm perfect, but a very good friend said to me, you must never say I don't have enough time for something. You must say I don't prioritize that, because that's the fact. You know, we have a certain amount of time in our lives and we have to choose what we spend it on. And it's much more honest to say, I'm choosing not to prioritize that right now. And I think when you hear you say that yourself, you hear yourself say that out loud, sometimes it goes, oh, well, is that the right choice for me right now? You know.
That's great, because, you know, it's the same thing with money, right? We choose where we're going to spend our money, and it's not like there's an infinite amount of it. And it's the same thing with your time. You know, every day only has 24 hours. So you have to choose how you want to spend your 24 hours. And I know sometimes when I coach people, I have them look at the week instead of the day. Because it's more manageable to think, okay, what do I want to do in the week? And we always set, you know, SMART goals. So things that we really know we can achieve. And hey, if you achieve it and you do an extra one, you feel great about it.
So I had mine when she turned 50, gave me a book that I read when I turned 40, and I came back to it now in my 50s. It was about healthy aging. I forget the name of the book. I'm going to give it to you and you can put it in the blog. But what I see, I don't remember the name. I don't remember who wrote it. I remember it was a doctor of aging from New York. But I remember the key messages, which were as you get older and your physical health starts to go downhill, and it does probably from the age of 30. I think it's probably more noticeable from 40, certainly from 50. I'm feeling it. You know, different stages. Well, right, different steps. And I remember him saying, your health becomes your job if you want it to be. If you want to age well, it's all about aging well. It's not about living forever. Your health becomes your job. And your goal is every week, you've got to do some strength work in whichever way you choose to do it. As we get older, weights become more useful, resistance, because the muscles are atrophying. You've got to do some mobility work. You've got to keep the joints active and moving. You've got to get out of breath every week. Properly out of breath, because you've got to test the heart, the cardio, the lungs, the respiratory system. And you probably want to be doing something 5 days out of 6. You know, and there's a massive rules of thumb. But if you look at your week and think, okay, I've got to move, I've got to be strong, I've got to do something to do with mobility, not to mention my mental health, you know, my soothe the nervous system, calm myself down. You said giving yourself time for you. I always think as my life as being, I'm putting energy out there in the world all the time. I teach, I put a lot of energy into my classes, put a lot of energy into my kids, my friends. I feel like when I come to my mat, it's like when I'm bringing it back to me. You know, I go to the gym, that's hard work. I come to my mat, I'm bringing my energy back to me. So I think, yeah, you know, all of this is about what you want in life. I'm very clear. I want to age in a body that feels good, that moves well, where I still feel like me. And so my physical and mental goals right now are about building that for when I'm 80, you know.
No, I get that. As well, you know, the other thing that's really, really key is that movement is necessary for our prefrontal cortex as well. So for keeping a sharp mind, we need to have this suppleness, this flexibility of thought. Like I in my work, I can also, you know, when I see people that are not physically flexible, it's kind of interesting how often it relates to them also not being open enough or not flexible enough in the way that they think. So it's kind of interesting how things sort of match in the physical side with the mental side and even, you know, that inner wisdom side. So there's a lot that's going on, and yoga does certainly sort of help us discover that inner self, let alone give us strength, because it is strength, and also give us some flexibility, but it's not openness. It's that openness that yoga gives you. That is really something.
And Can I just jump in and talk about balance? Because I'm looking at you and you've got this big word.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
sure.
here.
Yeah.
This is
actually balance. Balance is one of the key things as people get older, because it's the thing that in the end, people in their, we're not there yet, but people in their 70s and 80s, they fall, they break their hip, they go to the hospital. Next thing you know, they're done. So it's like balance is key.
And I think there's two things to say from that. One is what you said about the mind and body and, the relationship between them. We know when we look after our body, our mind feels better. We know when we look after our mind, our body feels better. And in yoga, you get to do both at the same time. And in other things, I know when I run, my mind feels better. So there's that side of it, but the physical balance, and there's also something called proprioception, which is very linked to balance, which is knowing where you are in space. So if I say to you, straighten your left arm and you do this, and I say, no, actually straighten and you do this, and I'm like looking for this. It's like knowing where you are. And actually, I just heard a study a couple of weeks ago, which linked to mental health, which linked to people with depression and anxiety having potentially, not proven, but they're going down this route, maybe poorer proprioception, to the point where they're not able to self-soothe. They haven't realized they're going into a difficult space until they've got so far down the line that they're actually in crisis. Whereas if you have better proprioception, better sort of self-awareness, self-feeling, you're able to go, oh yeah, I'm feeling pretty tense right now. I mean, this is the same as mindfulness. We do it in yoga. My stomach's tight, my shoulders are tense. I'm using my body as a tool to access my mind. But the physical balance, you're absolutely right. Our balance is falling off a cliff certainly falling off a cliff after 50. It's going downhill till then. So the ability to stand on one leg, the ability to move your body smoothly in space, actually, the transitions between movements, those are the skills that if we're 70 and we trip off a curb, they're going to potentially stop us falling. And B, if we do fall, we'll probably land better. And if we've got strong hips, we're way less likely to break one. And those things just become so important. And they don't have to fall off a cliff. It's like the muscles. They don't have to waste away.
No,
if you use it, you won't lose it.
I'm with you. And the actually when you talked about talking about the balance and coming back and sensing the body, where you're talking about the people that kind of move into what I would call a panic attack, having this, not being able to really do this. I understand what you're saying. It's interesting. Because in sophrology, it's the same thing. We're always sensing the body so that we reattach ourselves. We're so much in our head these days. And I mean, it's either that or you're in your phone. And if you're in your phone, you're in your head. So it's getting out of the head and back into the body and reconnecting on a different level with the body while you're in this, what we call supraliminal level, which is sort of the theta state. And you have such a different experience of the body in that state, that you then can start understanding like, oh, I'm feeling this way in my body. That means X could happen. What does my body need right now to keep my body and nervous system in a good place so that my mind can stay in a good place? It's interesting, but as you said, it takes practice. It does.
Yeah, it does. It does. It takes practice to learn. Yeah. But it's learnable. We can all improve and do and find, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Mandy, I'm gonna leave it at that, because I know you are a busy woman. And I really want to thank you so much for being here, especially my first one that I've done like this. And I'll be looking forward to a yoga class next week.
I would like to say to your truly balanced people that I'd love to welcome anyone who wants to come. When I started yoga, I started in a big, huge yoga studio in London, and it was full of yogas and it was very intimidating. I teach a lot of people like us. I teach a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I increasingly have a bunch of men coming, particularly my Friday morning class is becoming the guys' class. Wednesday night too. We do know that real men do yoga. And I think for me, at any age, you can find something. And I think to simplify what yoga really is, I say to people, we move a bit, we breathe a bit, and we feel a bit better. And that's really all you have to do to start. So I'd love to welcome anyone who's interested to have a play.
Oh, yes. And not even for the people who are just in our area, in the Geneva, Nyon, kind of in that sector. Mandy has a lot of things available online as well. So there's plenty out there for you if you would like to explore Simply Yoga. It's SimplyYoga.Life. Is that correct?
SimplyYoga.Life, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll put all your details in for everybody. So I just really thank you, Mandy. I love the way you speak. I love the way you speak about yoga, the body, the mind. It's wonderful. And the other thing is it's authentic. I mean,
Well, it's, you know, it's a tool, and I suppose it's been a tool in my life. It moved from being a sport to being a tool. And I think it's actually a set of tools, as you know, with the work you do. And so, you know, if we can find the tools that work for us, then we're setting ourselves up for a healthier, happier future, right?
we are going to close with that because that was beautiful.